afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. So excited you could join us. And I wanted to throw out there, we'd love for you all to please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Congrats to all of you who submitted early applications. November 1 was yesterday. And well, right now it's in the future, but by the time this podcast airs, it will be yesterday. So congrats to all of you for getting those in early. And just a plea to you from your parents, counselors, and from your future self to get the rest of it done now. Don't leave the rest to the last minute. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about gap years and PG years, and we're also going to talk about resumes and their role, if any, in the college application process. But before we get to that, I'm really excited to welcome my colleague and former financial aid officer at Loras College, Zachery Gries, who's going to talk to us a little bit about financial aid notification timelines for those of you who have submitted those early applications. Hi, Zach.
Hey there. Hey, Beth. Hey, everybody.
I'm so glad to have you here today. And I think one of the things we do get a lot of questions about when students are applying in early rounds. So whether that's rolling or early decision or early action or priority is, the ever important, when are we going to find out how much money we're getting, if any, from a college, whether that's financial aid or merit aid. And so we thought we could talk about that timeline today, especially because it's top of mind for people. Mm-hmm. And so I think my first question for you is, in terms of notifications, there are difference between when you might find out about merit aid versus financial aid offer letters and notifications. What's your sense of that?
Yes, I think that's a great question, and it's good to delineate because I worked at a college that gave merit scholarships, and because of the motive we had with merit, we presented that early. So we started admitting students early. We wanted them to know at the time we admitted them that we're really excited to see you here. Here's some assistance to keep you interested and perhaps try to have you come do visits. So my sense on merit scholarship money from an admissions announcement is that happens much earlier in the timeline. If the college begins doing admissions sometime in the next month or so, I would guess that many colleges might include those dollars and that contribution right on the letter. I've also heard of situations where some colleges may send a follow-up from the financial aid office a week or two after. So that's a relatively early process when we talk about merit and scholarships and that nature. If I compare that to the financial aid notifications, those are going to be more holistic. And so you're going to have the admitted students who applied early and got their materials in, and then the school has to receive the financial aid applications, of which there's two, a CSS profile and a FAFSA. And then they got to put all the data together and try to make sense of it in a way that helps students understand things, students and the families that are considering that school. And so that usually comes, in my experience, sometime in January. For some colleges, they might try to get it out early. Sometimes it might be middle of May, late May, early April. But I think that'll be a much later announcement. And unfortunately, from my perspective, that's the more valuable announcement.
Right.
Notification.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk. It's probably a good thing. We did a segment about 2 weeks ago on the different early ways to apply. But I do think it's important to note, right? So priority deadlines and early action deadlines and rolling admissions, there's no commitment for any of those. So you're at Loras, you're tossing out that merit aid. When my son was applying to college, he applied to some schools that offered merit aid. And as you say, he got information on that right alongside the information about, hey, congratulations, we've admitted you. We weren't applying for financial aid, but I know that like you say, at those schools, the merit aid comes right away. They're kind of hoping, oh, you might accept their offer, but you might need to wait to find out what the financial aid offer is. And you're going to need to wait, but you have that time, because when you get admitted in priority or rolling or early action, you don't have to notify the school that you're going to attend until the May 1 deadline, right? So Bingo. Plenty of time. Yes. But with early decision, of course, that's different because you've made a commitment to sort of withdraw all of your other applications and commit to that school. That's the agreement that you made when you applied early decision. So financial aid packages then are typically going to operate a little differently. Can you talk us through that piece of it?
Yes, yes. I think you're spot on because you're committing to a school at the time you find out if you get admitted. You may not necessarily have that same value for a financial aid notification because you're already decided. And hopefully, for students that are thinking of early decisioning, they've done some other research. We can talk about some of those tools that would be helpful. The net price calculators, some of the estimators are valuable in those cases.
Mm-hmm.
But by that point in time, the colleges, my sense is that they're already saying you need to have done this homework prior. Whereas a student doing regular decision, rolling admissions, colleges have a different perception on that. You get to work through the process and wait for those notifications to come and then compare. You get to compare one
Right.
option with the other, and the hope is that that helps you make a decision that's better suited to your values.
Right. I know that you froze there for a second, so I'm sorry if you were, but yes, you get to compare, and that's the one of the big things that you don't get with early decision, right? You don't get that opportunity to compare financial aid packages.
True.
I know that at Penn, where I worked, the financial aid award was delivered right alongside the decision, which arrived typically in mid-December. And I know that when I applied to college, in the dark ages, the financial aid award came alongside my decision then too. Although interestingly enough, the FAFSA was not available until a later date, the way it will be this year.
Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about so the FAFSA, and we've done some segments on this one already, is new this year. There's a simplified version that is going to be unveiled. For the past few years, the FAFSA has been available as of October 1st. But it didn't used to be. And this year it's not. We're well past October 1st. It's still not available. So talk us through that piece a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, sure will. And for some context for the listeners, the FAFSA used to reference the immediate prior year's tax information.
Right.
So the FAFSA would open January 1st of 2024 for those of you who have seniors in high school, and it would reference 2023's income.
Yes.
So the challenge that imposes is that if a family didn't do their tax returns until middle of February, typically they're scrambling because they want to then do the FAFSA.
Right.
They either had to estimate numbers on the FAFSA or wait until they did their taxes and then submit, which meant schools didn't get the records until middle of February, end of February, and then they had to scramble to get the notifications out. A couple of years back, maybe 5 years ago, they referenced a prior income year, which allowed them to open up the FAFSA on October 1st, and we've been spoiled by that
Yes.
for about 5 years. And so, to your point, my sense is that we're bumping that FAFSA start back to December at some point, whatever date. It's still going to reference the prior year income. So as soon as it opens up, families should have all the tax information they need.
Right.
But it is going to perhaps delay what we've been accustomed to for about 5 years, with the FAFSA opening October 1st and being ready and having taxes and being able to kickstart that process early. So spot on. I was looking at a few schools yesterday just in anticipation of this, and I noticed on their website, some of them were saying, submit the FAFSA ASAP. They had some ambiguous language. Others had very specific deadlines, but it was substantially after December, January 15th, February 15th, February 1st. So I think that should give families hopefully a little bit of peace of mind in relation to the FAFSA.
Yeah, and I think, as with anything, some colleges are doing a really excellent job of being transparent and specific and saying, we know it's not available yet, when it's probably going to become available here, and here's where we're going to want it. And then others are saying, submit it ASAP, which is not particularly helpful. But, again, this is not a segment about that.
Exactly.
But this does bring us to, how was it all those years ago that you could deliver a financial aid package? Again, different from merit, right? Merit is discretionary. The colleges who offer merit are going to make a decision about who are their best applicants in the pool that year, who they're most hoping will come to their campus, and they're going to give those students merit. Financial aid is based purely on a family's ability to pay. And it's forms like the FAFSA that help a college determine that. However, how did they used to do it if they weren't getting that FAFSA information until January, February? And that brings us to the CSS profile.
Yes.
So talk to us about that and those deadlines and how that might allow a college to package a student before receiving the FAFSA.
That's a great question and a good segue. So CSS profile normally has opened up on October 1st, as has the FAFSA. Both forms can be done same timeline concurrently. Some colleges require both. The CSS profile, typically a high level contrast from the FAFSA, it requires more information. So it captures everything the FAFSA does and then some. So on one hand, what I think is optimistic for students considering a college that requires a CSS profile is that because the CSS profile is capturing more information and everything that's already on the FAFSA anyways,
Yeah.
colleges can make some pretty strong assumptions, and it may not really modify their standard timeline a whole lot. The FAFSA becomes more of a formality in that
Right.
case. I worked at a college that only required the FAFSA, and I know there was talk of some schools maybe using CSS profile for 1 year because it was capturing more information. That's a lot of work for a college to implement if it's just going to be for 1 year. So it wouldn't surprise me that many colleges chose maybe not to do that, and they just said, "Hey, we'll just delay the process if we're a FAFSA only school." But the CSS profile should help families maybe continue with the more normal timelines, even
Right.
though they'll still have to do the FAFSA. I think that would be how I'd answer.
Yeah, exactly. And so, for example, place like Penn, place like Cornell, basically all of the Ivies, many of the selective private schools out there who offer ED are requiring the profile, which is what's going to allow them, I think, to package these students in plenty of time. Because what none of these schools are going to expect is that they're going to admit a student in an early decision. That student needs financial aid and is going to say, yep, I'm committing to you. I'm withdrawing all of my other applications before they know what that aid package is going to be. Because you can do the net price calculators, you can do your due diligence, and still what you think you're going to get and what the college gives you are not always going to be aligned. I used to travel with, when I was working at Penn, we traveled with Harvard, Georgetown, and Duke. And one of the representatives from the other college used to say, there's a difference between what you want to pay for college and what sometimes the college feels you can pay for college. And those two are not always aligned, often not aligned, quite honestly, right? So, yeah.
Yep, that's such a great point. And yeah, I do think that if the schools you're looking at, we always talk about on the podcast, I've heard you say it, know your deadlines. If
Yes.
you're looking at a FAFSA only school, just anticipate maybe more of a delayed process, but you're spot on with the CSS assumption that
yeah. And, and if you are applying to a school that offers ED and they only require the FAFSA, those are good questions to ask. If you don't get a package when you get your decision, my guess is that school is going to be willing to allow you to remain in the pools with the other schools until they're able to give you a package. I don't, frankly, but there are so many colleges out there. I would never say, I know for sure that there isn't a school with ED that only requires it, because I'm sure that that's not true. But, and I think we probably would be remiss if we didn't reiterate that if ability to pay, like if you have a very limited amount of money to pay for college and you cannot pay more than that, and early decision just simply may not be the way that you go, right?
it's risky. Yeah,
It is.
completely agree.
It is risky, unfortunately. Although I will say you can be released from the commitment, but that also means that your student will be released altogether. They rescind the offer of admission, and now you are, going to see what happens at your regular decision school. So they're certainly not going to hold you to paying $85,000 a year if you don't have that money. But then you lose. So
That's true.
all right. Any last thoughts on this piece, Zach?
The only thing I may go back to just briefly, I was skimming through some of the notes I had seen to help families think about how are schools languaging this, and I noticed that some schools use really ambiguous language too. We talked about some saying ASAP, some saying, I saw one school that said December 1st, but then they had a little asterisk and they clarified this is our suggested timeline. So
Yes.
I thought of that because you said, hey, contact the schools, and my sense would be, just to reiterate that point, if there's any confusion on your part about these timelines or how things work, use the school's website, but don't be afraid to contact the college, because I do think it's important to understand exactly when and how and why you got to do these different forms and things like that. So
Right, exactly. And asking questions is never a bad thing. And the
completely.
college is never going to penalize you for asking questions, provided that, you ask them nicely.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
as I assume you would.
Yep.
There'll be zero penalty for that. They're never going to take away an offer of admission because you dared to ask a question about something as important as how much it's going to cost you to go there. So
Absolutely.
anyway. All right, Zach, thank you so much for joining today. This was really helpful.
Yes, absolutely. It was a pleasure, and have a great afternoon.
All right, you too. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're talking about gap and PG years. So don't go away.